it always comes down to how good quality data that goes in. So bad quality data going in means you're going to struggle to produce good quality, relevant, on-time information.
Welcome to the Capture podcast, where we dive deep into the business of law, uncovering insights that help law firms thrive. I'm Graham Moore, and today we're tackling one of the most critical yet challenging aspects of law firm management: financial reporting, accountability, and the role of data in driving success. Joining me is Kinahan, a partner at Hazlewoods. They're a firm renowned for their expertise in legal sector accounting and financial advisory. So Trish, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Thank you. So you've been working with law firms for many years, advising them on financial management and business strategy. What drew you to this field? How did you end up in it? And what keeps you passionate about working with law firms?
So I've just celebrated 30 years for Hazlewoods. So I started as a trainee, age 17.
Wow.
And when I was planning what I wanted to do, I knew from day one I wanted to be a partner. That was from day one. And I wanted to do something that made a difference. And I went down the route. I did auditing my training, but I didn't find auditing as exciting as some people do. So I decided to go on the tax angle. And I found tax really fascinating. And what I wanted to do was combine my tax planning with actually helping a business. And we were just about to set up the legal team about 30 years ago. And what I love about the legal sector is every day is different. I can combine my problem solving kind of expertise with tax planning, and just the fascination of how a business works is just fantastic. And in legal, you also have that added element of clients always challenge you in the way that they look at stuff. And everyone has a different view on that. And that kind of keeps you on your toes, that keeps you passionate. And I always want to be one step ahead of a client in terms of thinking about new ideas and what I see in the industry to be able to add some value. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely. And that being challenged is something we probably both encounter regularly working with law firms. Goes with the territory.
Absolutely.
So starting with financial reporting in law firms, it's often cited as one of the biggest operational challenges that they have. Why do you think law firms, even well-established ones, struggle to produce and distribute up-to-date, high-quality management information?
I think it's probably a combination of two things. Let's have a look at the systems first. And whenever a firm buys a new system, there's this kind of challenge between the fee earners, what they want from the system, and what the accountants want. The case management side is important for the fee earners, the financial side is more important for the accountants. And often the accountants lose out. So what you'll find in most systems is a decent case management side of it and probably a poorer financial side. And that's why firms struggle to produce anything decent out of their system without having to put it into Excel or whatever. If you take the likes of SOS, that hasn't actually changed for 25 years. That still has crystal reporting, which, as we know, you can't put into Excel very easily. You've got the likes of those that link to Zero, so the Leaps and the Clios, and that transfer of data over from one to the other is also struggles at times. How they count for disbursements is difficult, and the transfer over doesn't always work. So you've got this kind of grating problem with the actual system itself. And then on top of that, it always comes down to how good quality data that goes in. So bad quality data going in means you're going to struggle to produce good quality, relevant, on-time information.
Yeah, absolutely. And that data quality thing, we obviously come across that regularly in the work that we do. Why do you think law firms struggle with that? Do you think they're different to other organizations in that respect?
I think, yes, I don't think because they're not accountants and they don't think in the financial way, they don't see those metrics on a day-to-day basis at fee earner level as being as important, and they don't see the connection. A fee earner doesn't see the connection between them and the organisation as a whole. And I'm sure we'll touch on that kind of thing a bit later on. And therefore, if the data doesn't go in properly, if people don't record their time properly as a basic information, you're always going to struggle with that. You're also going to struggle with the fact that systems don't shut down in the same way. So, for example, our system we have, it's real-time billing. So if you don't bill by midnight on the last day of the month, that's it. If you don't post your time by that day or 12 o'clock the following day, that's it. You can't post back into the previous quarter or the previous month. Whereas in a lot of law firms, you can post back. And of course, that means cutoff is wrong. So you're not getting reliable data.
Yeah, yeah. That whole month end cut-off piece is a regular challenge that we come off and come across. And yeah, there's various ways to deal with it. But as you say, it's not fundamentally built into their systems. So
Which is surprising, isn't it? As producers of systems, you would have thought they allow cut-off to happen. Happens in the accountancy world. It's very strict, and it should be, because that might help deal with some of these issues if we had more discipline, because you're forced to do things.
yeah. So are there any common mistakes or inefficiencies that you see, across law firms when it comes to financial reporting?
I think in the smaller firms, what we do see when we take on new clients is people that they don't post opening balance adjustments. So their data isn't there, they don't own it. So the accountants will do adjustments to their accounts, but they won't give them the opening balances. So you're always starting off with the wrong balance sheet. And I find that quite a strange thing. It's your data, you own it. The accountants shouldn't have responsibility for it. They should help you make sure you've got good quality data. I also think that cutoff is a problem. That's a mistake because you're not reporting correctly. And I think actually in some ways, the mistakes or inefficiencies is not knowing who you're reporting to and what you're reporting. So you can create a massive data, and let's be honest, with the system you've got and what we can see, you can create data till it's coming out of your ears, so to speak. But actually, the most important thing is who am I producing a report for? What am I doing? And what are they going to do with it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's really what you need to home in on and then produce the right data in the most efficient way for that person or group of people.
yeah. So in terms of the financial reporting, it's really a case of boiling it down to the essential elements and keeping it simple. Very often is really important. What would you say the essential elements of a financial report are for a law firm?
So I think it's your profit and loss account, balance sheet, cash flows. Those are really important. Lots of people know a balance sheet, but it's really important because of its statement of assets and your cash flow links your P&L and your balance sheet together. So I've made the profit, but what have I done with the profit? And that's how your cash flow links to your balance sheet. And lots of people won't do a cash flow forecast or rolling cash flow forecast. So that's important. And then I think also we need key KPIs. And those key KPIs is watching what's been happening, but more importantly, what's going to come down the road. And people forget that's what we're looking at KPIs for is, for example, trends on new matters. That's a nice graph. You see, that's lovely. People go, oh, that's lovely. That tells me so much about what is going to happen in the next 3 to 6, 12 months, depending on the type of law firm, and gives you insight. And that's what your KPI should be doing, not just producing lovely graphs.
Yeah, that whole insight piece and looking forward, not just looking backwards at what's happened.
Yeah.
That's important, as you say. You need to know where you are, where you stand financially, but also much more usefully from a management perspective is what's going to happen in the future and how you can infer that from your data.
Definitely. As people forget, I think the accountants always look back, but it's actually what the whole thing is about looking forward and learning from what happened to what can we do differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of really interesting potential coming now with the advent of AI in terms of helping people look forward in that respect. Um, so moving on to looking more at the lawyers themselves. I mean, you touched on this. They're probably less interested in the financial numbers, perhaps than they should be, certainly than the accountants and the sort of senior management would be. I think one of the impressions we get is there's a lack of accountability often in law firms amongst the lawyers, for those key financial metrics that they can control. What do you think is the root cause of that?
I honestly think it's that lack of connection with the whole business. So you get a law firm. Can you imagine a law firm, 100 fee earners, and I'm just this one person. So you kind of look there saying, well, what's the difference? What difference am I going to make? But actually, the collective 100 make a huge difference together. So the first mistake people make is actually not training the staff as soon as they come in with a specific training program of understanding financial management. One of the things we do is financial training, and to make the penny drop on lockup, for example, we do this little slide that says, right, okay, I create a matter today, and the lockup is, I don't know, 6 months. And if you say to a fee earner, you've been paid 6 times before this firm actually sees 1 penny of that matter, that kind of makes that connection start to work. So it's the fee earner training, making sure they understand the why and making sure that they see how they fit into the bigger picture.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's something that firms struggle to do on their own. As you say, providing that training as an external person, it's almost like when you try and tell your kids what to do, and they never take any notice of you until some uncle or aunt comes along and tells them exactly the same thing. Yes. So I think there's definitely a lot of benefit in getting that as an external message as well as internally.
Yeah, and we're really here to support the management team. And you're right, sometimes the third party
Yeah.
helps support it, but doesn't mean you can't do something internally thereafter and
Yeah.
take the message and keep it going.
Is there anything else you think that law firm leaders could or should be doing to, help them connect their own performance to the firm's overall performance profitability?
Having data available. So you do this training, and what you don't want then is not to have the data available. And I know, depending on some law firms, how they feel about availability of information. Do we just show that person's information? Do we show everyone's information? And that's a personal preference really of what you want to show. But you can't do the training and then not have the data available so they can actually monitor what they're doing. And I think the other thing is there's an element, what we see is do as I say, not as I do type culture. And if you want the best out of performance, then senior management, senior partners need to actually follow through what they say. So be good at time recording, be good at billing, manage your WIP, manage your residual balances, all those kind of things. You can't tell someone to do something because they're not going to do it if you don't do it. And that's probably the fundamental issue we do see.
Yeah. And just trying to enforce that with rules doesn't necessarily work. Just saying people have to do that. So, are there any other strategies that you've seen work well in helping firms to get that over?
So if you've got what you find is if you've got a firm that's got a culture of wanting to be the best at what we can do and striving for that, peer pressure really helps in terms of people watching other people's data or whatever. You've got that sense within the business that we want to do well, and therefore they naturally do follow the rules. And then if you've got a culture of people wanting also the best for it, so senior management behave and do the right thing, you naturally see that. We have seen some firms where they do discretionary bonuses, have a kind of what I call the balanced scorecard. So you've got the financial matrix, but also financial hygiene, making sure you deal with your WIP, making sure you deal with your old WIP, your residual balances. Part of your bonus is based upon that. So there are ways you can do that. It shouldn't always be stick. There should be an element of stick and carrot, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on culture there. And I think, that culture can almost generate a pull rather than needing to do a push if you've got that right in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, are there any specific tools or technologies that you recommend firms adopt to make accountability easier, more effective?
I don't think there's anything specific because you look at all the programs that are out there, all the systems out there, there's loads out there already. So it comes back down to the people point. Got to get the people point right to get the data in right to produce the information. And the systems will produce that, and your system catch on top of it. That does work where they haven't got it available, or BI, that kind of information that extracts it. I actually think it comes down to people.
Yeah. Yeah. As with so many things in business, really, it always comes back to the people.
It does. Professional services. We're not producing widgets here, are we?
No,
Professional
that's
service
right.
always going to be people challenges, which is what makes it fun.
So, We often hear that lawyers really don't engage well with lengthy financial reports, data in rows and columns that don't really seem directly relevant to their work. So, how do you think firms can present financial data in a way that better resonates with their teams?
The key is understanding how people think, isn't it? If you go back to school, we go back to how we learn. Some of us will learn by writing stuff, some will learn by listening, and some people will learn visually. And I'm one of those kind of visual people. So it's understanding how people interpret information and learn. So for some, graphs are brilliant. Simple graphs, trying to get a message across is brilliant. Some people like tables. So it's just finding a way that works for each person or each team. Because once you connect with someone, you've got it. So it's worth actually spending the time to work out how they think, not how you think and how you want to produce the information. It's how they think and how they interpret. So it makes a little bit more work for senior teams, but my gosh, you crack that, you've cracked it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you work with a lot of firms. In your experience, how do the best performing ones ensure that their fee have the right financial data at the right time?
So the best ones probably have dashboards. Dashboards are really, really useful. Having enough information on the dashboards, not trying to cram everything in one place. So it's understanding what's the key drivers for that firm that they really want to focus on. Having really good heads of departments that are looking at this data and actually talking to people on a regular basis about their statistics and where they're going on it. And then having really, really focused accounts departments, FD or partners, depending on the size of the firm, following up on all of that. So you've got those kind of situations where there's accountability all around it. And the ones that you see really, really good are the ones that have I call them focus groups. So what you're saying is actually, instead of it just being about senior management telling everyone this is what we should do, you take a group of people across all levels and you say, actually, how can we do things better? Because what you find is, although we'd like to think as senior people, we have all the ideas, and we do have lots, don't get me wrong, some of the brilliant ideas come from people who are actually on the ground doing that work, who are first year, second year qualified solicitors, who think, why do we do it this way? Why not do it that way? And particularly with the onset of AI and all changes on there, those efficiency points, they're so worth listening to.
Yeah.
And so all those kind of things that come together, that's what makes a difference between a great firm and a good firm.
Yeah, that's fascinating that. And yeah, as you say, ideas can come from anywhere, can't they?
Mm. To open up the forum. We have in our business, we have a suggestion scheme.
Okay.
And there's a financial incentive if the suggestion is good enough. And we do have a lot of things that go in,
Yeah.
but actually every so often you see something, you think that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it hasn't come from a senior person.
Yeah, that's really good. So looking slightly broader at data in law firm management. So once you go beyond financial reporting, law firms sit on a wealth of other data about the clients, matters, performance. Are there ways you think firms could make better use of that to make better strategic decisions?
Oh gosh, yes. So let's kind of assume perfect scenario that what goes in is good. So my little obsession at the moment, and my clients will know this, is looking at process and pricing. Because you can see at the moment, there's a huge challenge on profit margins. If you take out client interest,
Yeah.
the underlying performance of a lot of law firms are really struggling in terms of that profit margin compared to where we were pre-COVID, because the cost of doing business is so much more. So what you're trying to do is, how do we make that margin better? So the first thing we need to do is focus on pricing. So if you've got great data, you can make strategic decisions on, is our pricing set right? How do we do value added pricing? If we're doing fixed fee, are we recovering properly? So you can use that data to make decisions on where our pricing strategy should be. And that's the first thing we must do. Because if we dive into process first, the danger is we become more efficient. And if we're hourly paid for our work, we're going to pass that efficiency on to our clients straight away. And it's like, can't do that. So that's why we must do pricing first, process second. And with AI around the corner, and I'm going to say it is around the corner, it's not quite there yet. I know there's lots of conversations about that, but we're not quite there yet. If we can understand what our process is, then we can start to understand where we can make efficiencies. But we can't understand our process if we don't have really good data.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That it's always been one of my observations that the hourly billing model, really doesn't help drive efficiency. So,
No.
as you say, focusing on efficiency is rarely going to actually help with profitability. You've got to
Yeah.
get that front end pricing right, and there is so much really good data to help law firms with pricing if, as you say, if the data is actually complete and reliable.
Yes. And it's, this moment of time, I feel like I want to get onto my hobby horse and talk about time recording. And I know as an accountant, we started from day one, 30 years ago. First thing I had was taught was my timesheet, complete your timesheet. And I know for solicitors, it's a completely different environment unless you're in the magic circle. In your day one, you definitely learn about that. But the capturing of time is so, so vital. It is not about being big brother. It's about understanding what you do all day in order to make your life as interesting as possible, as efficient as possible. But I fear that people use it for two reasons. They use it for pricing because it's easy. That's not what it's there for. And then people fear it's Big Brother and therefore don't do their time recording properly. They double discount scenarios that you hear about. So I'm all for capture that time, whether it's chargeable, non-chargeable, to really understand what people do in their day job.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if they do that right, it opens up a whole wealth of
Ah,
really useful information.
it really does. Yeah, information overload if you're not careful. But I'd rather have that than
Yeah.
not have that data.
Yeah, unfortunately, partial time recording takes you the opposite direction and actually can produce all sorts of misleading results.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, really important. So looking outside of legal, would you say there's industries that you think law firms could learn from when it comes to data-driven decisions? Are there industries that you've worked with or you've worked in where you see it working much better?
So in the professional services world, um, no surprise, I'll say the accountants of this world, because of the fact that go back to the basics of time capture. We've grown up with this, so our data is much more robust, and we can make better decisions on performance, the cost of doing certain jobs, that kind of thing. So there's a lot to learn from accountants, and with my clients, we'll have these conversations about what's more important, productivity or realization. And there is only one right answer, because it's productivity first, realization second, because it will come together eventually. So I think in the professional services sector, probably the accountants. Outside of that, kind of an interesting scenario because I know there's a managing partner of a large law firm. I won't say who it is, who came from the manufacturing world. And if you've ever done anything in manufacturing, they know the cost of producing any unit down to the pence or the point zero zero pence. They have got it absolutely nailed. And he's talking to him, he's brought that to the law firm and made a huge difference. And that's all about understanding the cost of production. And if we're honest about business, and I've done lots of things. I'm a farmer's daughter. I was married to a person that had a transport business. And if anyone knows anything about transport, the margins are really tiny. But every business basics are all the same. It's just the question of levers on it. And all you're doing is trying to work out what is the cost of production and how do we make a margin on it. That's the basics of business. So it's just taking that concept and running it into the legal world. So you can learn a lot from manufacturing in terms of that discipline of data and how you use it to make a difference. And it's just levers of profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, it's often interesting. I think we're seeing more and more senior finance people come into the legal sector from other sectors, and yeah, they always seem to bring fresh perspective and a
Yeah.
fresh approach to that. Yeah,
It's quite interesting because it's that weighing up of bringing that fresh approach versus understanding the sector, isn't it? And the nuances, if you've got the regulations, sisters, counts rules, that
yeah,
those things can be learnt over time. It's
yeah,
that fresh pair of eyes that sometimes just needs every so often.
yeah. So we've sort of touched around the edge of that magic AI word a couple of times. With that sort of coming along, do you see opportunities for law firms to leverage AI on the finance and operations side of the business? There's obviously an awful lot of talk around AI in the delivery of the legal services,
Mm.
in the legal advice. But on the operations side and the finance side, do you see opportunities there?
Yes, yes, probably more there in the shorter term than the delivery side. Yeah, as you say, the headlines are all about how to deliver to the client and everything. But I think a lot of financial is process. You know, creating an invoice for a client is a process. Collecting money is a process to a certain extent. Time recording is a process. So actually, I think the gains are potentially in that process-driven area. And I can definitely see how AI can help with that. But go back to what I was saying earlier, if you don't understand each step in your process, you can't make an improper investment and make those changes. So that's why it's really important to document it clearly and understand the time involved. Because you can spend an awful lot of money on AI and actually not save time until
Yeah.
such time as AI gets a bit cheaper.
Yeah, yeah, it's another automation tool, and I think as with every generation of automation we've gone through, it boils down to, as you say, understand your process, analyze your process, and work out where your biggest gains potentially are.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Okay. So looking looking forward now, if you had to predict, how do you see the role of finance professionals in law firms evolving over, say, the next 5 years?
I see them becoming more and more important because of the need that the pressures we've got in the industry on performance and margins. So I think the people with financial ability becoming a really key part of it. I also see that actually, if you can get this process part um, more efficient, those financial people's skill set need to change. So you're going to have a skill set changing from processing to interpretation. And actually, this is what you want. You want people to be able to interpret data and therefore make decisions as opposed to spending the time doing the data. Because there's a lot of energy goes into producing a management pack every month or year end or quarter dates or whatever. And then the energy is lost because I've done it now and they've got no energy to do the interpretation.
Yeah.
And what you want is AI, whatever it is, to get all of that bit done. And then you can interpret the data and say, how are we going to use this? And so that's how I see it changing. So there's going to be an upskilling of people
Yeah.
required, I think, over the next 5 years.
You think there's potentially a different type of person needed? There's, I think one of the observations I've always had with this is that there's a big part in communicating. It's not just doing the analysis and getting the insights, but it's then communicating those with the relevant people. And I think in some areas that can be a challenge in finance teams.
Yes, yes, the typical accountant, as we would call it. I think we're both understanding
Yeah,
that one.
yeah,
I'd like to say I'm not one of them. I
yeah,
hope.
yeah,
Anyway, everyone has their views on it. But
yeah,
yeah, communication skills are really important, really, really important to be able to convey a message and take people with you. We always talk about that, don't we? We take
yeah.
people with us on the journey of how do we make it better. So yeah, I think upskilling and making sure communication is right.
Okay. Do you think there's any major industry trends that law firm leaders should be paying attention to at the moment? Anything that you've observed over recent months and years?
I think in terms of trends, it's hard to ignore at this point in time the feeling of consolidation. It feels at this point in time, private equity are all over the legal sector. It might be because we've probably seen quite a few big deals announced in the last 4 months, and private equity making more comments about we're looking at the sector. There's a lot of money both in the UK and the US wanting to invest in this sector. It's a really interesting sector. It's got all the hallmarks of being brilliant for what we call a buy and build. So in terms of it's fragmented, there's a lot of law firms out there. I know it's shrinking, but in comparison to a lot of other industries, we've got a lot of law firms there. Probably a lot of law firms that aren't run as efficiently as they could be. And it's got good growth. So despite what we see in the macroeconomics, actually the predictions for law firms or the legal industry is that it will grow year on year. And it's a huge export market. It's quite surprising when you look at the numbers. It's a huge export market for us. So it's got opportunities in it, which is why private equity are interested in it. So you can't ignore it. And what private equity could do for a firm is give it that investment of capital that perhaps is not there with the traditional funding, to invest in AI, for example, but more importantly, invest in people. The problem we've got with private equity and the perception of private equity at this point in time is we haven't seen that many changes with consolidators selling. We might see that in the next 5 years. So people have this perception of private equity are coming in, reduce overheads, then sell it on, not really caring about the people. And private equity have got a bit of work to do, I think, in terms of saying, no, that's not what we're about. It's about the longer term. And once those two come together, if they come together, then you can see that it can play a part in the business. But it can't forget that actually it's a people-based business. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So you can't ignore it. It's not right for firms, but it will have its place.
Yeah. Okay. As you say, there's such a lot of activity at the moment. It's really interesting to keep an eye on and to see what happens. So, from your own personal perspective, you've worked with many law firms over the years. Can you share an example of a firm that really successfully transformed its financial management approach? And what did they do differently? What did they learn?
Yes, so the ones that you see the real change, it's down to the people piece. So it's a combination of the fee and the training. I can think of one where there was a new FD who had a complete focus on performance, really, as opposed to just doing the numbers every month, really focus on performance. And the partners were with this and supporting it. If you don't have the partners and the senior management team supporting it, it doesn't work. They set up the focus groups I talked about earlier. And there was this accountability across all fee earners as to what was expected of them, and therefore the communications were there, the one-to-one conversations were there. So it all became about people, because once you get the people bit right, the data follows it. The quality of data improves, the information improves, the dashboards are there, they can keep an eye on it, but it's all about people. What you find is that if you've got one weak link, i.e. someone doesn't want to do it or won't comply, then people start to fall away. So they make sure that they're safety net. They can see people drifting, they capture it and move it back.
Yeah.
It has to be a real focus across all areas that this is what we want to achieve.
Okay. So focus, support from the management, key things.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think we'll leave it there. Thanks, Trish. It's been a really insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners find out more about you, the work you do at Hazlewoods, and how can they get in touch if they'd like to learn more?
So you can go onto our website, so hazlewoods.co.uk, so Hazlewoods, but Hazle. And you'll find all details about our legal team on that. I'm one of two other partners on the legal team. We've got a wealth of knowledge across all areas of the legal sector. And please, if you do get in touch if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Trish. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning into the Catcher podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with anyone you think will benefit. Stay tuned for more insights from industry experts on how to drive growth and efficiency in your law firm. Until next time, take care. Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.